This chapter I'm about to read is one of my favorite times in my life, but I actually hate reading it. I mean, I didn't rehearse this. I don't rehearse any of them. I'd like you to see the normal emotions that I have. I have no idea what's coming out here. But in this chapter, there's a man in this state named Larry Sullivan, Lawrence M. Sullivan, who was a public defender for forever. And he really saved my ass. Okay? So this is a tribute to him. Chapter 18, title, We Had Strike 1 and 2. Now here's balls 1, 2, and 3. Every 10 years, the United States Constitution requires a census be taken throughout the land. All citizens are counted according to their name and situs for the purposes of federal voting. Anyone failing to submit is subject to a $100 fine and 60 days in the federal slammer. No joke, that's the law. During the National YR campaign, part of my platform in the treasurer's race was my objection to this mandatory fine and jail sentence for not submitting to governmental invasion of my personal right to privacy, especially my religion and national origin. Neither one has a twit to do with voting. The privacy issue cut across all philosophies for all sorts of different reasons. Most people just hate the procedure and cooperate with the census in some grumpy sort of way. In 1960, it was challenged in the federal court, and the challenger lost his ass. His name was Doolittle. Imagine that. This time, a real little decided to take him on single-handed in 1970. A commitment I made while traveling around the conservative strongholds with Davis Elkins, Pappy. One of the issues Pappy talked about that actually made sense to me. Some of these right-wing wackos insisted the census was also a communist plot, just like they insisted the zip code was. They claimed computers will run our lives. It's going to be worse than Russia. Ruskies used the zip code as grid coordinates for firing missiles. Now the census was going to be used for firing individuals. It is a massive communist plot. Any conservative freedom fighter could see the invasion of privacy issue. Committed and convinced now as a freedom fighter, at least mentally, having had a long ago given up my physical prowess, I decided this census thing replaced the aggression I missed in my quest for the judo gold. This new national scam is the most brilliant of all my intellectual scams, the king of my major stings, not only of the century, but of the entire history of the entire world. I was psyched. It was a one-man operation, single-handedly scamming the United States Census Bureau. It made my adrenals pound and eventually scorched my own earth. Larry became my defense attorney and was helped by research, hand-holding, care, cleaning, and maintenance by a DuPont company corporate lawyer named Frank Payton. He was a Republican political leader in my dollhouse district, a very nice, easygoing guy who smelled, no, reeked like a scholar. He acted like an individual, and he spoke like a warrior, which always sent me confusing signs. I had difficulty seeing the blind loyalty side of it, which is required by warriors. I needed to see blind loyalty in order to trust any person. I still do. If it weren't for his alternating and confusing vibes, which meant give in and then sell out, I would have adopted him immediately as a comrade in arms. But as it was, in the beginning, we both kept our distance and a wary liking of each other. It was easy for me as a person growing up in the city with experience on the streets to type any personality. It's a built-in survival technique. They call it street smarts. And we always know to be damn careful who we trust. We have one condition in the streets, a must promise, and everyone has to do it. We need to bleed for each other. When true warriors meet, It's like looking in the mirror and seeing each other's instantaneous commitment to one another. This point is a definite necessity for any claim to being in the warrior cult. Warriors signal immediately that they will go down to the sea in ships and stay with the underdog forever. Intellectuals have a bad habit of selling out, trading places, and jumping ship at the first sign of a personal threat. They call it reasonableness. They call it caution. They call it doing the smart political thing. They call it political correctness. And to make it even more complicated, Frank was a leader in the Republican Party for the politics. He was a card-carrying conservative. And I often wondered, can he switch? Can he be a warrior? Larry, of course, was well known as a middle-of-the-road guy that conservatives love to call liberals today, but I trusted Larry. Census Day 1970 was approaching. The international newshawks, I call it reporters newshawks, serving in the Delaware State Legislative Hall, and I became committed personal friends. I always liked reporters. I always got along with them. This one particular guy buddied up to the bar with me while I was drinking alone one night, and after a very long drinking bout over many beers and many napkins, we extracted and exacted a scam. He was intrigued with my census idea. We made a secret agreement, and I mean secret. Until I wrote this book, this story was never known by anyone, including Larry. I told him, I will deny access of the government to my private life, but I'll answer all the constitutional questions, such as name, address, age, how many children, things like that. I'll include those of my family, and then I will write none of your business on the rest of the pages and fire it right back. It's due to arrive April 1st on my doorstep. I'll fill it in, I'll mail it back immediately, and I'll give you a call after I drop it in the mailbox. He agreed. This procedure is called an exclusive. No one else in the entire world knew about it. No one will ever know the entire scam. The condition was that he would not file his story until I agreed. In other words, it had to go in the mail. The wire service newshawk told me he was scheduled to leave soon for an immediate employment transfer to Brazil in South America. He said, I'll write the story based on our meeting. I'll wait and I'll file it April 1st, the night I leave town. Okay? We laughed. We thought we were very clever. And we had a further agreement that from that particular moment on, I would never speak to anyone, including any reporter, including all fellow newshawks that I knew, about what I filled in on the form. I would never talk about it. This is called a privilege. He now has, a reporter has my story, and I have a privilege, and he has a privilege. We never have to talk about it. He could protect his source. April Fool's Day came. I filled in the name, age, and address as required by law for me and my family, and I wrote none of your business on all the other blank pages. I fired it off in the mailbox, and I waited. The Sunday headlines screamed, "A man's home is his castle." 6:30 Monday evening, Chet Huntley on the Huntley Brinkley Show flashed my picture across America. A legislator in Delaware today refused to fill in the United States Census form, alleging his home is his castle and his right to privacy has been invaded by government intrusion covered by dogma, doctrine, and deceit. I don't remember saying that. Talk about adrenaline flowing. Everyone in the country wanted an interview with me. How many toilets do you have? None of your business. How many bathrooms do you have? None of your business. The phone was ringing off the hook. The John Birch Society offered free legal services. The American Civil Liberties Union offered free legal services. I was ecstatic about the notoriety and the intention. Kay was not too ecstatic. She was ready for one long joyride she knew would cripple me forever, and she was dead right. She said, every nut in the United States is calling, supporting your position. Why don't you give up and fill it in? I'd laugh it off. Personal checks started arriving from other states and foreign countries all over the world because of the Wire story, and subsequent stories were written as a result of the original Wire service story. Notoriety blossomed throughout the land. Old friends sent clippings and notes of congratulation. Old friends is a political term at this point, as you well know. I refused financial help from anyone. It was not about the money. This was about principle. I sent all the checks back that had return addresses, and I tore up the others. Party leaders were furious. Even Willie and Mike were pissed off. I thought it was truly brilliant. The financial czars in Delaware, led by Big John Rollins, Ren DuPont, and Hal Haskell, had all contributed heavily to the Nixon campaign, more so than anywhere else in the country. Nixon's Secretary of Commerce was embarrassed by this uncomfortable upstart young Republican Turk in Delaware, who would not play the game and roll over like a good little doggy when the money boys patted me on the head. Even my best political buddy, the national chairman of the National Republican Party, Tommy Evans, also from Delaware, and a close friend of Nixon, said, "Tommy, you made your point, fill it in." One day, during that legislative session, I was summoned off the House floor to the woodshed in the governor's office by the governor's attorney, Jerry Hurley, now a very prominent judge in Delaware, who had the United States attorney, F.L. Peter Stone, on the other line. I was confronted officially by the official Republicans. "Fill it in, Tommy, or we prosecute." "Fuck you, I will not fill it in. Prosecute." I grinned at Russ and said with a shrug, "Hell, somebody has to do it." Russ and Jerry shrugged. Neither one grinned. The United States attorney, party leaders, and census personnel, to their credit, tried just about everything to get me to fill in the form. Meetings were arranged. Lunches were arranged. Even drinks were arranged. And finally, a full meeting in the governor's office was held with all the top 13 Republican Party leaders. Each one spoke in turn about how they understood my point of view, but must withhold future services, future financing, future nominations, future everything if I persisted. They each took turns going around the room. Each had a shot at me. At every turn it was always, "No, sir. Thank you, sir. I understand your position, sir, but I am not filling in the form." Big John Rollins, last in line for comment, turned to Russ, the governor, and said, "Russ, he ain't gonna fill in the fucking form. Now you find me 11 more like that and I'll show you how to run this state." Everybody laughed. However, I knew full well they would all keep their threats and promises. The hoi polloi phony conservatives in Delaware had no time for philosophical principles or conservative ideals. This was all about who was the best suck-up to President Nixon and big campaign contributions of pure gold, money. Republicans in Delaware could care less about political or conservative ideals. These conservatives just wanted to keep the money flowing in the right direction, and I knew that. And I knew it was the exact moment that I was dead in politics in Republican circles in Delaware. The government prosecuted. I went to Larry and asked him to be my lawyer. Larry and Frank had the indictment thrown out twice. It was defective for technical flaws. A quirk in the law requires that the Secretary of Commerce had to appear personally to open my form in court. Further, he had to bring my actual form itself. It was legally confidential by law and could not be opened in any courtroom without the Secretary himself present and giving permission. It wasn't even clear if I could give permission.